Welcome to Moonbeaming, a podcast about lunar living, magic, creativity, tarot, and more. I'm your host, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, and I'm so honored and excited to be here with you today. Welcome back. If you are just joining us, you're listening to Moonbeaming. I am your host, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, and this is a place where we have real conversations about all kinds of different things: spirituality, healing, archetypes, the tarot, mental health, nervous system regulation, boundaries, being highly sensitive, energy work, protection magic, moon magic, and so on and so forth. Today, we're talking about money. We're talking about finances. We are keeping it real. I have such a special guest, the one and only Paco de Leon. Paco is an author, an illustrator, musician, and founder of the Hell Yeah Group, a financial firm dedicated to inspiring creatives to engage with their personal and business finances. Her career experiences in banking, business consulting, financial planning, and wealth management have informed her financial philosophies. She is a TED speaker, and her work has been published or featured in the New York Times, NPR, Bloomberg, Vice, and others. Paco lives in Los Angeles with her wife. I have known Paco for maybe a decade. She's really amazing. When I was first starting my business and didn't know anything, I was just a weirdo, queer artist who was trying to get it together. Hashtag get it together. Paco was so kind and generous with her time. I remember a session where literally Paco sat down with me in front of QuickBooks and helped me figure it out. I have a learning disability, and I learn best when someone's sitting next to me telling me what to do, basically, until it all like downloads into my brain. And Paco is just so generous and so kind and is just a gift to the world. And we're going to be talking about money this episode, and we're going to be talking about money next episode. So to celebrate, I guess, I'm running a sale on my Money Alchemy workshop. This workshop is about 1 year and 1 month old. It's been a super popular workshop. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on this workshop from folks. Normally it costs $69, and until July 13th, it is $49. This is the only sale we're having for it this year. This is a workshop where I share common money blocks, 3 ways to step into more abundance. There are a dozen worksheets, including an amazing tarot spread that I do with my personal clients. Yes, I'm sharing the secret sauce that I've developed in my client work. There's a meditation. It's a really beautiful workshop. It's an hour and a half, I believe. Maybe it's 2 hours. Basically, I share a lot of knowledge I learned as a former nanny, waitress. Did you know, have I shared this? I paid my way through state school through working at TGI Fridays. Yes, I did. It was an okay gig. Anyways, I've had just about every job you can think of from working at a friolator to data entry to being a cocktail waitress. I was a prison counselor. I made very little money, mostly minimum wage, my entire life. And then I decided that I was going to make more money. I started acting different. I started thinking different. And I started addressing my money blocks. I had to do it mostly on my own because when I was doing this like 15-ish years ago, there were online workshops, but I couldn't find them. There was certainly not. Again, I think there was YouTube, but it wasn't like I was going to go to YouTube because a lot of the advice from financial advisors, they felt off. I had to find my own way through a mix of mindset work, magic, subconscious reprogramming, and also just money education, which led to different behaviors. Scarcity runs really, really deep. It's especially deep when you've been working for minimum wage or for very little. I was on unemployment for something like 10 months. I've experienced a lot of different things, a lot of different housemates too, right? Anyway, scarcity runs deep. We have to begin consciously adopting an abundance practice, abundant somatic states that I was trying to do with my Embodying Abundance class. If you want to know more about it, you can click the link on the show notes. It's not one thing. It's not money magic. It's not mindset work. It's not energy work. It's not education. It's not different practices. It's not different behaviors. It's not different mindsets alone. There is no one thing. Just like any kind of healing or any kind of shift, it's all the things and all the things you have to learn. And it's always a good idea to start with your blocks. I know it's rude. I know it's rough, but generally, in my humble opinion, that's the place to start. And that's why I'm so excited to have today's guest on. Paco addresses the nervous system in their work and their book, Finance for the People. They also address the very different places that most people start from and the very different relationships people have to money that are directly correlated to class, race, gender, geographic location, ability or disability, and so on. Don't you hate it when you're getting business advice from someone on the internet, like, hey girl, hey, your business bestie, and you find out later that they don't know what it's like to have debt? They never worked as a waitress at TGI Fridays or at a Greasy Spoon. They never counted quarters on the way to the gas station because they had to fill their tank, but they only had quarters left. You find out maybe that their boyfriend runs a startup. They casually drop that their father owns a hedge fund. They never knew what it was like to be broke, to be in debt, denied loans, and on and on and on. It's a personal pet peeve of mine about this like businesswoman coaching space. You'll see someone who's confident and who says they know all about business and money. And you're like, great, cool, teach me. And then somewhere down the line, you find out they didn't even really have to work. And you've been working since you were 13 or 15. You've had 2 jobs since you were 17 or 18. They came from vast generational wealth and have a major safety net if anything happened to them. It's irritating to me because I really can't relate. And I really think that it's like the invisible knapsack. Those of us who did not come from money, did not come from knowing abundance, do not have a safety net. We have, our backpack is heavier. We have different things we have to think about that these people didn't have to think about, you know? And this is where Paco and Paco's work and Paco's book, Finance for the People, come in. Finance for the People is such a comprehensive book. I highly recommend it. It covers all the ins and outs of personal finance. It also brings up privilege, window of tolerance, practices, everything we need to think about and adapt to become more comfortable around money and to make money work for us. Definitely pick up the book. Definitely sign up for Paco's newsletter. Paco is such an amazing person. They make intense subjects like finances, money, like, well, kind of calm. You'll see what I mean when you meet them, when you hear our conversation. It's a gift. It's really a gift. We talked all about their book, issues that people have with money, practices that folks can do around healing their money stuff. And I also give Paco at the end a sweet reading all about the possibilities of expanding their family. Enjoy. Hello, hello, hello. On the podcast today, I have a very, very, very special guest that I could not be more excited about. I know all of y'all are going to be excited about this guest too. Today, we have multi-hyphenate, business owner, financial advisor, author of Finance for the People, Paco de Leon. Paco, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I would love for you to introduce yourself in your own words about like who you are, what do you help people with?
Sure. I run a company called the Hell Yeah Group, and the Hell Yeah Group does a couple of things. The first thing we do is what you are experiencing at this moment. I go around town, or the internet rather, and I talk to people about money. And my goal there is to, well, one, to just talk about money more. Talk about it in a way that feels inclusive, talk about it in a way that feels safe. I really want people to understand how money is interconnected. Everything you do, for better or for worse, touches on money. And I think the more that we feel comfortable talking about it, the less we have to white knuckle through life. The other thing I do, or the other thing the Hell Yeah Group does, is we run a bookkeeping agency called Hell Yeah Bookkeeping, and we run the books for production companies and marketing agencies and various different kinds of creative businesses. And I've found myself dedicating my life's work to, just trying to help my community, which are creative professionals and human weirdos, the people I love so much. They have been told this lie that they are not good with money, or that this world is not for them, right? The world of money is not for them. And I just want to say, I want to kick the door open and say, hey guys, it's totally for you. And let's have a different conversation about it and elevate that conversation and make it available to as many people as possible.
You also are a creative yourself.
Guilty.
You are a visual artist and you are a musician.
Yep. Yes. I play guitar and sing, and I'm always kind of tinkering around on instruments. One of the most exciting things that's happened in my life recently is I bought a drum set, and my sweet wife is tolerating me being terrible at drums. But I love...
Hey, it's a metaphor, right? You got to be a little bit clunky with something before you really gain experience and mastery with it.
Absolutely. And I just love like the blissful ignorance of a beginner. You know what I mean? You don't even know how bad you are. And it's such a fun place to be, especially now that my work is starting to become public and people are starting to know me, there's a different kind of pressure that I never anticipated, right? And so it's nice to just have a thing that's just for me, and I can be silly and no one has an expectation, you know?
I want to talk about that because you brought it up.
Right.
What pressures are you feeling now that your books come out? You've, done a lot of great press. People are asking you to speak. How is it feeling? Because people don't really talk about it, do they?
They don't. I mean, I did a lot of work to kind of expand my nervous system to get used to the amount of stress that I knew that I was going to be under. And so media-wise, I felt ready to be seen. I had to do some interesting healing that I didn't know I needed around safety and security. I thought some of my biggest hangups were around worth, and maybe they were, and maybe I have done the healing there. And the next thing I need to heal is to realize that I deserve safety and security. And in these situations, talking to people on podcasts and being on television and sharing my thoughts, putting them out into the world, even if some people are going to be upset and say weird things online, I'm still safe and secure, So that's been a big thing that I've needed to do. The other thing I need to work on and realize is that productivity, quote unquote, for a creative person is sometimes walking in the park. It's sometimes lying down. It's sometimes like watching a movie. It's talking to a friend, like really having your mind blown by a delicious beer. It's a lot of different things that I don't think society talks about. And the more I relax into that, the less I feel anxious about where's my next big idea going to come from, or am I going to meet my article deadlines on time? Things like that.
I'm so glad you brought up everything you just brought up, because I was going to ask you some questions around it, which I'm really glad. The first thing I want to underline that you brought up is that around people's projections or their own nervous system responses or activations around money, because I am similar to you in that while I did not get a degree in like finance, I have always been fascinated by money, specifically because I didn't come from money. No one talked to me about money. The messages I received personally about money from my family were so loaded, so stressful. My family went bankrupt, and I just remember so many screaming matches about money. And like, I was a waitress for much of my life. I was just living paycheck to paycheck. And I had to do so much healing and so much education around it in order to be comfortable around it. And with that comes a lot of nervous system regulation. And I find that when I talk about money publicly, which I do, I have begun teaching what I've learned, but it's way different. I mean, it's different and the same, and we're going to talk about that. It's like more magical and more like, it is nervous system stuff. It's mindset stuff. It's things that I've had to learn the hard way. But people get really activated. People are either, and I'm curious about what your experience has been, because people are either responding in a way that is like, how dare you, but what about this, and what about that, and what about this? And let's be real, this is on the internet. So this is not the platform for a nuanced conversation anyway.
Right.
Tone is lost. People are up in their own stuff, or people are so relieved. Like, thank you for I've never thought about that. Oh my gosh. Like, I've never thought about pairing my attachment style with my like relationship with money, or I've never thought about like money not being an energy, like in this horrible, like spiritual industrial complex. Right. They're like, it's energy. So if you have good energy, you'll make money. And if you have bad energy, and then it's all your fault. So I'm wondering, my dear, what have been like your camps of reactions now that you've gained, more of an audience?
There's something that I've been doing lately just to see the reaction. Because I'm just so entertained by money. I like you. I'm just so curious like this is a social, a society-wide delusion that we are all believing in. And that to me is like, are you guys seeing this shit kind of reaction? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So one of the things I've been telling people is I've been telling them about my very first job in the financial services industry, which I talk about a little bit in the book. But I worked as a debt collector for Bank of America. Like, that sounds like an evil person working for an evil company. And if you know me, if you know my voice, if you've read anything I've written, I don't see myself as that. I see myself as a very compassionate, caring, helpful person. And so I think people maybe have a hard time reconciling why I would work as a debt collector, and then how coming out of that has allowed me to facilitate conversations around money in this way. So yeah, that's one thing I've just been throwing out like a flaming grenade. Like, I used to be a debt collector. Let's see how you react. And the reactions are often like horrified in a way, like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry that happened to you, kind of a thing. Or like, did you not have a choice or something like that? And truth be told, the job description did say credit manager, and I was 20 years old, so I didn't really know what that was. But once I got into the position and I started working, that has been one of the most valuable jobs I've ever had. One, because I sat on the phone for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, 2 years. So that's a lot of hours, just strictly asking people for money, just having a conversation with a stranger about their personal financial situation. And on every call, what we had to do is we had to say, why are you late on this payment? What's going on? And so I'm so good at that. I'm so good at just being a human being, talking to another human being about money. And so I think with that experience, I just come at money from a place where I understand that that person is already going to be triggered. Like, it feels offensive if you think about it on its face to be like, you're late on your payment. Why are you late on your payment? Right? It feels accusatory. So I think there's that piece. There's also the piece that, like, I grew up with addiction in my household. And that has, I am like the person who's trying to figure out the pH balance of the room and neutralize. Yeah. So as much as that's quote unquote a bad thing that happened to me, I've figured out how to take that quality and translate it into my work. And so much of my work is just feeling the room, reading the room, seeing how somebody's eyeballs are reacting, or these little micro movements to kind of piece together what they're feeling about money. And it's a gift that I have. And so sometimes people do get upset, mostly online, with the written word, and people who maybe are not following me, right? So like the most famous, or not most famous, but the most prominent way people get upset with me is through my Refinery 29 article, or monthly article called Taking Stock. Refinery is a challenging audience to begin with.
We don't need to get into
But so yeah, there's a range of reactions, just like you said. Some people with the book, people have been so supportive and so stoked and so grateful that this perspective is out in the world. And so am I. I would not have written the book if I didn't think I had something important or different to say.
I love the book so much. I love this book. First of all, again, I want to say the name of it. It's called Finance for the People: Getting a Grip on Your Finances. And then you have all of these great subheadings: navigating an unequal system, stepping into your power, addressing your beliefs. What I love about this book is I think that conversations around money that are a bit more forward thinking are happening on podcasts or maybe on social media, but I don't know that they're happening necessarily in the finance world, which is where a lot of finance books are, right? Like we have the Susie Ormans and I don't know, yelling cis white people who are like 50 and over. No offense, but like it's definitely a different...
It's a genre.
It's a genre, and it's a different, it's a very specific demographic. And what your book... well, first of all, let me ask you, who is your book for?
It's for anybody who has felt unseen and underserved by the personal finance industry and the voices in that industry.
I love your book because it breaks down basically every segment of finances, the financial industry, from personal habits to budgets to investing to retirement stuff to beliefs. But what I really love about it, I mean, I love a lot about it. Everyone needs to get this book, by the way. Doesn't matter where you kind of are in your money, because even like I've done a lot of work around money stuff, and even I was like, oh, I really need to like check this thing out or check that thing out. So it gave me a lot of to-dos to kind of just tighten things up and explore more around certain arenas of my finances. I love that you talk about ancestral stuff. I love that you talk about familial stuff. I love that you speak about nervous system healing. You talk about, this might be the only financial book that exists that talks about the window of tolerance.
Yeah, I learned about it and I was like, this seems really important. The window of tolerance seems like this plays into financial decision making. And I looked back in retrospect, right? And I realized that I had made a financial decision outside of my window of tolerance. And something, I guess, lucky happened to me where I got a job as a financial planner. So let me back up. I got fired from this job and it threw me into a spiral. I was like, what am I going to do? And who am I in the world? And how can I help people? I think the classic millennial trope of like, how can I make meaning from my career? And so I was assaulted, many years, 15 years ago now, I think. And I went through the trial and I felt a closeness to the deputy district attorney and we won. The man is in prison. And when I got fired, I just like clicked back to that feeling of like, she helped me. I can help others with their power, step into their power, speaking up for themselves, all this stuff. And I thought, I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to become a deputy district attorney. And, so I started studying for the LSAT and doing research and reading all about it. And then I got this job working for this guy as his assistant. He's a financial planner. And I thought, okay, well, I told him, I said, you have 1 year because I'm applying to law school and I'm going to leave you. And thank God he did this. He really tried to convince me not to go. He would send me articles. Like at the time, there was like this ABA scandal where the law schools were hiring students at the school so that when they looked at the employment numbers, it looked like more students were employed, and all sorts of crap like that, And then he would bring me into meetings with attorneys who did everything right? Great undergrad, great LSAT score, great law firm, a great law school, great law firm. And then he would say, what do you want? And they would say, I want to quit my job. And then he would bring trust documents. He would drop them on my desk. He would say, can you read through the 75-page trust documents and like, let me know what you think? And I was like, what does this even mean? So he did right by me. He kind of put me through the ringer. But one of the things I finally did, like maybe after 9 months, after taking the LSAT, right before I was going to put in my law school applications, was I sat down and I was calm. I built a spreadsheet and, I wasn't reacting to this law school decision because I was in some existential crisis, right? I was calmly looking at, and I didn't know at the time, but I was just like calmly evaluating. I looked at the numbers. I saw how much I would have to pay back. Then I researched how much deputy DAs starting and then what their cap was. And I was like, oof, I'm going to be working for a long time to pay off this debt. And then I was, thinking about how if I want to help people, what am I doing for myself? Like I'm trapping myself. There's got to be a better way. And ultimately I decided not to go to law school. But when I learned about the window of tolerance, to take this all back, I had realized that I made that law school decision initially outside of the window of tolerance. And then when I finally sat down and ran the numbers, I was within it. And being within that window of tolerance just changed everything. It allowed me to look at the decision I was making from a place of cognition instead of a place of fight or flight, fear, lack of security, and just like a wildly unstable place from an emotional standpoint. And when that clicked for me, I thought, we should talk about this, folks. Like how many people are making financial decisions, big and small, outside of the window of tolerance? How does that perpetuate a cycle of quote unquote bad decision making. That's what it looks like on the outside. But on the inside, you're in a cycle of stress, you're in a cycle of anxiety. And I think if we can do that for big decisions and practice the tolerance, right? Practice asking yourself, am I in my window? What do I need to do? Your brain gets good at getting into that window, so that when you're in line at a Whole Foods and you see some bullshit that they're trying to sell you at the register, you can feel yourself. You can say, ooh, I feel activated by that, but like, let me just take a deep breath or do whatever I need to do and realize that, okay, that decision that I was going to make to buy that thing or whatever, I shouldn't do it.
Put the diet kombucha 6-pack down, slowly walk away. You don't need it. So I love this because, money, I always share, it's such a loaded symbol. It's so loaded, right? It's so emotional. It's such a stand-in for everything from worth to safety and security. You speak about it in the book in these terms, and you also talk about it right from the jump about money and power being intertwined, right? What have been some ways that you have advised clients or folks that you speak with around untangling like their personal money story?
Yeah, that is a really challenging one because everybody has their own unique story, right? We could all be fed the same message and we can all internalize that differently. And so the thing that I think has been most helpful for people, it sounds kind of silly to recommend, but you have to really spend a significant amount of time understanding who you are and learning about yourself and being curious about yourself and, being kind about it instead of seeing an action and automatically wanting to judge yourself for being bad or not smart or bad with money. I invite people to invite a spirit of curiosity, like looking at yourself from afar and being like, why do you keep doing that, buddy? Like, what's going on? What's up with that pattern? And there's a lot of roads you can take to that destination of being more curious. For me, it was having a meditation practice that was just kind of haphazard for like 5 years. I would just plop down, put on a timer and hope for the best, or listen to some guided stuff on YouTube. And it wasn't, like the most efficient way, but that taught me like, oh, your thoughts are clouds in the sky and they're not who you are. They're just things that you can observe. And that then led to being able to watch myself and to watch my patterns and to think a thought like you're not good enough, or people like us don't deserve that, or people like us don't earn that much money. And then just kind of go, that's an interesting thought. I wonder how that got inside of there. Let's double click on that little guy and see where it leads. Journaling is really important. And this one, like taking care of your physical body is really important, like getting enough water, getting enough sleep, vigorous exercise. I think all of those things, getting light into your eyeballs, right? Being in the sunshine when you can be in the sunshine, all of those things just kind of like bump up your baseline normal to like being as like feeling as good as possible and like just like coming ready and whole as possible so that when you do the work, you can be very effective.
100%. I'm so glad you brought it back to curiosity and those micro moments, because my experience has been a great way to approach this is like the zoom out and the zoom in, the macro and the micro, where looking at, what were my earliest memories around money? Like familial wise, what were my earliest experiences around money from a job, like my first job? What was I taught or not taught? Like, what did people talk about? What did people not talk about? Is like this zoom. And then also like, what have I internalized vis-a-vis my identity or my class or my race unconsciously, because we're getting these wild cues like you speak about in your book. The whole system, our whole financial system obviously is based upon theft, genocide, and enslavement. And when you think of that being the root of a system, there's going to be a lot of intensity there. There's going to be a lot of activation there. And it's not our fault, you know, like we didn't start that, right? And you talk about some things you can do. And I think it's really important for us to pay attention to our cues. What happens in your body when you like get a paycheck in your hands? What happens in your body when you have to invoice someone or you have to go to the IRS? Like what is happening? Is your nervous system going into fight? Is it going into freeze? Or do you want to numb out? Do you immediately want to like punch a pillow? Are you crying? Are your hands shaking? Like, because this is a very, I think people don't talk about it enough.
Yes. I mean, especially like when it comes to two people in a partnership who both are struggling with ever talking about money. Sometimes, I mean, and you've kind of nodded to this earlier, it ends in like a screaming match, tears, it's just not great. You know, we're awkward and kind of fumbly when we're trying to deal with money and trying to talk about money. And then, you know, after that happens, it's kind of like, you know, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to face that again. I don't want to deal with that again. And that kind of perpetuates this ostriching head in the sand. Let's avoid it. But yes, I think all of those things that you mentioned, observing your body are hugely important. Yeah. What a good question is like, what are you resisting at the moment when it comes to your finances? And for a lot of people, sometimes it's as simple as I'm resisting even having my logins, which is always so fascinating to me. Is like, you don't have your logins. That's like, wow, that is, you know, you're really, maybe you don't even see how your past, how your trauma, how your experiences, how the narratives of others, it's like reaching through space and time and directing you right now today to say, don't even have your logins. And that's okay. Start where you are. And, you know, it's important to recognize that this money shit is crazy.
And like, I mean, this kind of leads me to another question I have, which is like, and it's a scam.
Yeah.
Like it's a low key, high key scam. I mean, not to, again, you don't need to agree with me. It's just sort of my personal opinion of like, you know, how the system is, you know, again, just my personal opinion. The system is obviously rigged.
Yes.
The system is rigged to favor those who created the system and those who benefit from the system historically, right?
Yep.
And so one thing I would love to hear from you about is, what would you say to the person who's one of their blocks or one of their resistances around getting a handle on their finances, feeling more empowered around their finances and money, but they don't like the system. They're like, but I don't want to be part of this horrible system. I care about social justice, or I don't want to be in with these, you know, Scrooge McDucks of the world or whatever. I don't like, does this come up with you?
Yeah.
And did it come up inside of you? Did it come up with some friends? Like, can you please talk about how folks can navigate that specific resistance?
Every day we opt in. That's a choice. And I know that most of us are born into the system. Very few of us are born onto a commune. But every day we opt in. And I think once you realize that you have to find your agency in this system. And I wish that I could have written the book that was like, here's how you win the game. But I'm a player too. And I didn't start, you know, with extra help. So I am why I think my perspective is unique is because I got the finance degree. I got the economics minor. I got the financial planning experience, yet I was still broke. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? I did all the right things. I checked all the right boxes, but if I didn't know the right people, I wasn't going to succeed in that career. So recognize.
Is that why you kind of like started your own thing?
Definitely.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So you want to touch on that real quick?
I'd love that.
Yes.
Because it's why I started working for myself too.
Yeah. I worked as an assistant at a business consulting firm. That's when how I learned bookkeeping and how to understand small business. Then I worked as an assistant at a financial planning firm. And then I created a position that was a junior planner because, God forbid, they just promoted me to financial planner. And I started to really understand the business, and I was taking on clients of my own. And I struggled because of the business model. They said we can only work with clients who had $1 million of assets that they could invest today with us. Otherwise, it's like, quote unquote, not worth it. And then when I look back on my Rolodex, I'm like my people are like the guy who studied drums and has student loan debt. Like, that's my person. The one who's like a painter who's like trying to make it. And hopefully in 15 years, you know, he'll have his own show and he'll be represented by a gallery, and it's kind of the long game. And so I just thought, gosh, there's got to be a different way to help the people that actually need help, because back then the financial planning business model was set up to only help people who already had the money. It just felt redundant to help some guy save 50 grand on taxes when the person who really needed help was like truly the guy who studied drums and is trying to be a creative in the world. So I started the Hell Yeah group as an experiment to see if it was possible for me to make a living actually helping people outside of this traditional financial planning model. And so that's why it's very media heavy, right? Like, I can reach the most people writing a book. I can reach the most people talking on a podcast, as opposed to one-on-one work. And, you know, the bookkeeping agency has been, you know, the revenue source. It's been the thing that keeps the lights on so that I can do this community service.
So going back, I love that backstory. And you proved that this model can work. Going back to like what you talked about, yes, we all opt in.
Right.
How do you advise folks who are just morally opposed?
Yes.
Which, you know, it's sticky. It's tricky.
It is. I don't think things in life are just neatly reconciled. And my experience as a human person whose family loves them, I grew up knowing that I was queer, and then I could hear snickerings. Is that the right word? Snickerings, or like whispers of like family members talking, so-and-so is gay. And I'm like, whoa, this is like worth gossiping over? Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. But I never thought, how do you reconcile like your aunt or your mom or somebody making a joke about somebody being queer? You in your body and your little person knowing you're queer, you don't automatically jump to my mom doesn't love me or my family doesn't love me. There's a gray area. How do you reconcile their worldview, their upbringing, who you are? That's irreconcilable, right? And for a lot of us, this elder millennial who still have friction with their families, right? As opposed to, I feel like younger kids, I don't want to say have had an easier time, but there's more openness, right? With sexuality, with gender, with all of these things.
There's certainly more attention. I mean, growing up, who did I have? I had like Ellen. Like, you know, that's not true. I had more. There was like that Katie Lang, Cindy Crawford cover that is like seared into my mind. I don't know if you remember it as well.
I don't.
Well, there wasn't a lot out there. Right. And now, you know, the 18-year-old coming out has at least a series of reference points for queer relationships and queer thriving, really.
Right. And so, you know, I'll hear Indigenous people talk about two-spirited people, about being queer, and they have this different perspective of like, we are helpers. We're here to say we have seen things from many perspectives, and we need to show you folks what that's all about. And existing in a system that wasn't built for you, finding your agency, realizing that if you want to make things different and you want to change things, you need to get the money because the money is the power, right? That is the same way of navigating, oh no, I'm queer. Do my parents love me even if they're talking about queer people behind their back? You know what I mean? It's not a nice, clean, now I invested in solar and everything's going to be all right. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be contentious. There's going to be a lot of friction. There's going to be a lot of tension, but that is what it is to be a human on earth.
I also think so much about taking a harm reduction model approach. You know, a lot of people criticize me because I've said, you know, I'm anti-capitalist, and they're like, even my own partner, we get into debates. He's like, it's not capitalism you're anti, it's greed, it's hoarding, it's extraction. it's lying, it's thievery. And I'm like, well, actually, again, I'm shelving that. But the reason why I say anti-capitalist is that I think that there are ways, because of the expansive relationality of money, we can change how we act around money and how we treat each other around money. And we see it in the customer who's yelling at the cashier, who thinks, okay, this person is making X amount, I'm entitled to that. We see it in the hierarchies of how certain people get treated and how certain people seem to get more respect. We see it in so much business literature that says, oh, pay people as little as possible. Don't give them time off. Don't and so in my own life, I'm constantly asking myself, how can I cause the least amount of harm with how I make money? As a white person, I'm very much thinking about how I can redistribute money, to Indigenous people and to Black people primarily, also to trans folks and other queer folks for sure. But we can ask ourselves, how are we going to begin to transform how we relate to money, literally, practically? First, I think it starts in the soma. It starts in the beliefs, and then it can extend out with like, you're a perfect example. Okay, I wanted to try this experiment. Okay, I want to bring finance for the people. I want to bring empowerment to what I do. I want to educate people. I want to make people feel less alone. Like, what I love about your work, love about your work, whether it's a newsletter or this book, is you break things down. Like, I'm always saying, like, explain things to me like I'm 5. Like, explain things to me like I'm 5 years old. And you really do that. You're not in a condescending way, but in a like very clear, very patient way. So I'm just wondering, what you think, what is a way that has been helpful for you to reframe beliefs around money, and what has been helpful for you with your clients? What kinds of transformations have you seen around reframing or transforming certain beliefs and certain behaviors?
The one that seems the most jarring to me is when people can relax and realize that this world is something that they can inhabit, right? The world of personal finance, of investing, of feeling empowered with their money, and being a small business owner who is not asleep at the wheel financially. When they just confront that they are smart enough, it's not, I think there's been this story, this lie. And it's funny because yesterday I was walking with a friend in the park who's an actor, and he's like the guy in his group of creative friends who like knows money, right? So all his creative friends go to him and ask him like, dude, you bought a house, what do you do? And he told me he had an experience recently sitting down with an old friend from high school who works for this financial firm that basically pushes product. And his experience was they were just using jargon. And I kept saying to them, I don't understand what you're saying. And I told him, I said, that's on purpose. How did you feel? You felt stupid, probably. Like, they're trying to break you down and scare you into feeling like you just got to go into they're like painting you into a corner, and that corner is buying crappy life insurance that's not appropriate for you. And so I think when people can realize that that's not always what it's going to be like, maybe not every banker is going to be somebody you're going to want to grab a drink with, but you can be the kind of person who has a boundary, who learns about this world enough so that you don't feel bullied and pushed around and taken advantage of and made to feel like a dum-dum, by salespeople. Yeah. That, I think, is the biggest transformation of all, because now they're researching the car they're going to buy or lease. And now they're figuring out how to negotiate between 2 different dealerships. Now they're raising their rates comfortably, and now they're rooted in their worth. They're not just taking what they get. You get what you get and you're thankful for it. That's not the attitude they have anymore. So I think as soon as you realize you're smart enough and this is all figure outable, it's simple. It can be broken down and digested in a simple way. You just got to put in the time. You got to put in the focus so that it expands in your life. That has been the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Meaningful to me to observe, to see people just really understand, like, I got this, I can do this. And then they're inspiring their friends, which is like all I could have asked for.
100%. And I love that you put a lot of focus on creatives, because creatives are the ones who can figure this stuff out. Creatives are the ones who create new worlds and new pieces of artwork. And I also think that if we reframe of, well, you've survived, or like, who is more creative than the broke person who's like figured out a way to, pay their bills, make their rent, like make a meal out of, whatever's in the fridge, whatever that may be. Like, that is incredibly creative, and you're totally figuring things out. So it's just sort of about, I think, being gentle, finding the right resources, and you're one of the right resources. I wanted to ask, how can folks engage in your work? They can buy your book. Absolutely. Are there, and please buy this book. Please. It's so valuable. It's so useful. It's so comprehensive and it's so expansive. And I just am so glad that you put it out into the world. I was wondering, how can folks work with you if they're interested beyond buying your book?
You can follow along our weekly newsletter called The Nerd Letter. Comes out every Wednesday. If you just go to thehellyagroup.com and you can sign up, and I will pepper you with all sorts of fun little nuggets I've found around the internet, including nuggets that have come from my very own brain. And if you're looking for a bookkeeper, you can follow us at hellyabk.com, or rather go to hellyabk.com and learn all about our bookkeeping service.
And also, if folks sign up for your newsletter, they'll find out about your teaching, right? Because you talk and teach, and
I do,
right?
Yeah, I definitely will always shout out any time I'm doing a workshop or anything like that, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so wonderful.
This was my absolute pleasure. So thanks for having me.
Okay, so I wanted to start this reading with some messages from your guides or your helpers or whatever is coming up for you that came in really clear. The words that came in for where you are right now, maybe energetically, is soft, gentle, and serious. And I was like, okay, well, what is this all about? And they kind of were alluding to maybe you being in a period or coming out of a period or needing to come out of a period of more intense work, more like red energy, very just almost like, I don't want to say this because I feel like, well, I will say it. The feeling I get is like pushing it to the limit or pushing right up against the edge. And so this is a time of pulling back in some ways energetically and getting serious about different things. And what seems to be coming up now, and you can tell me yes or no, is expansion as related to family. And when I asked about that, what they said was, you're in this really interesting clearing. You either have a business partner or an intimate partner, and you can tell me which one. I think it's the intimate partner, romantic partner, where for a really long time, your energetic pattern with each other has been like hot potato. Like, okay, you need to go do this. Okay, you're doing this thing. Okay, you got to go over here. I'm going to let you go over here. And there's been such a phenomenal amount of respect with both of you for what both of you need to do. Like, you both fundamentally respect that. And that is in part how it's been able to work so well for so long, because you're like, yep, totally get it. We have the same values. Both of you have a sense of safety with one another, and that you know the other one's not going anywhere. So you're like, okay, yeah, you can like go off and do your thing, or you can go do your thing. And it's been really great. At times, your partner has taken up more space, like their needs, what they need to do with their career. At times, yours has. Now you are in this place where both of you can exhale, take a moment, don't have to look over your shoulder. Things are as stable as they've been, and it's time to look at one another and ask, what is next for us? Kids, no kids. More animals, no animals. Beach house, second home, 3-year plan, international home. Like, what do we want to pool together and work on together? How are we going to make time for this? And the other thing I'm going to say about this is the bigger picture, like the spiritual picture, to help frame this is y'all are working together on the next level of healing, which is coming together to make decisions in the spirit of true reciprocity and equanimity, and like a real coming together in love and a real coming together in compromise. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making total sense. It's blowing my mind, actually.
So this doesn't all have to happen tomorrow, but conversations have to happen. Reflections have to happen. Like, you need to go off like underneath your tree with your notebook, and like they need to go off like with their girlfriends and talk about stuff. And then you have to sort of think about, it's feeling timeline wise, kind of by like late summer, you kind of will have your ducks in a row that you can kind of start either saving up for something or meeting with people you need to meet with, and really just making it both your joint priority. And that's going to feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah, change is uncomfortable. Like you said, we have a good thing going. We have a method to the madness, and we've gotten used to, all right, I'm going to kick it into high gear and you're going to chill and support me. And then we go back and forth. And now I have been terrified thinking about like, oh no, all the people around me are having kids. And I've gone from 100% no to like, I don't know, this actually, I've healed a lot of my own trauma with my parents. And now I'm like, oh, wow, I think my resistance was actually just pain that I was holding on to. And now that that's opening up, I'm terrified of blowing up my life because it's smooth and nice and great. And I know what to expect.
And you worked really hard for it.
Yes, I did.
And I'm really glad you brought up kids. I wasn't going to get specific because it's not my business. But I also think that there are ways, like from what I know of you, you're such an out of the box thinker that, hey, maybe it's adoption. Hey, maybe it's fostering. Hey, maybe like part of our process is we go away with friends who have 2-year-olds and we see what it's like for a weekend, or we like take a cousin's kids for like an overnight, or we start sort of trying this out in ways so that like the nervous system gets adapted, the brain gets wrapped around, hey, maybe you're like, okay, this is what I need for this to happen. And maybe what it is like, maybe we need this amount of money, or maybe we need this new house, or maybe we like, and then that's like stage 1 where you can kind of like ease into it in a way. It does not feel urgent. It does not feel like, oh crap, it does not feel like your partner is understanding enough that they're not like, this is how happened. Like right. I don't get that vibe at all. But the vibe I get is soft, gentle, serious.
I love that. I love it.
What do you want to ask the cards? We'll pull a couple cards around this, or anything else you want to know about to give you more information.
Oh man. I don't know. I don't really know. I'm open to whatever happens. that a bad answer?
No, a lot of people are like, yeah, sure. Well, let's just see what happens. So I'm going to pull cards around. Okay. Again, I'm like thinking of what I know of you. I'm going to pull cards around what might be the most difficult aspect of this to kind of like think about, either as a pain point or as a growth edge or something just to dive into head first. And then I'm going to pull a card around how to work with that, like how to calibrate that, how to address that.
I love that.
And yeah, I think, and then I'm going to pull a card around just a card that's going to affirm something that you or your partner have either been talking about or something that's been in your consciousness, so you can feel supported, like moving forward. Does that make sense?
That makes beautiful sense.
Okay. So pick a number between 1 and 3.
2.
And then 1 and 2.
1.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. All right. So, okay, this is what I see. The first card that got pulled around, like, what's the ish, is 4 of Cups. 4 of Cups is this very interesting card because it can sometimes refer to emotional stagnation or emotional patterns that are in place that are ready to be expanded out into. It also sometimes has to do with something you're not quite seeing, but I tend in my own practice to see 4 of Cups as a card that is sort of around recovery, meaning like you're in between. You've like finished up one thing, or you've stopped finishing one not great pattern or habit, right? You're like, I'm not scrolling anymore until 1 a.m. on my phone, but like, what do I do in my bed? Like that kind of like in between, sort of like, this all feels weird. So this is sort of what might be lurking around like the circumference of this issue, which is like, well, I'm not here and I'm not there, meaning like I'm not quite ready. Like I'm not quite ready maybe to do this. So what you can ask yourself is, what are the next stages of my recovery? I'm not saying you're recovering. I just mean like, what are the next stages of me coming back to myself more and me like centering my needs or what I want to take care of or what I want to do? Is it that I want to travel more? Is it that I want, this piece of the puzzle to be in place for myself? And really thinking about like where you might be resistant emotionally to sort of giving yourself a little bit more time. I also think that you're in this interesting space where you don't want to go too deep either way, like either, down a rabbit hole either way.
Sure.
And that's okay. Just like acknowledge the card that is going to help you get out of this, like, is the six of wands. The 6 of Wands. So we can see this card is like, I'm looking ahead. I'm kind of taking the lead. This is about taking action, right? Sixes are also about creating a new chapter. So this is kind of interesting. So I'm wondering if you can look farther ahead, like into the horizon, and think about what part of you or your partner or your joint vision is ready to take the lead, and how can you move forward on that horizon? Again, I think this is less about like to have child or not to have child, and more about what do I really want out of my life? Emotionally, experientially, ambition-wise, and how can we do this together? We were doing it kind of separate. It worked really well. What do we want to work on together? Yeah, sure. It could be a child, but it could also be, I don't know what, my partner and I often talk about, okay, do we want to start a hobby, or do we want to go deeper with like energetic work, or do we want to work out together? Like, do we want to create a side business? Like what is that vision for the both of you? And what part of yourself needs to be a bit more spiritually led, because it's sort of like your sixes, or like you're turning this corner. We have wands, which is fire, which is very much centered in spirit and like what the bigger picture is and what your spirit needs to heal and where your spirit needs to go. And I think sort of like the cups card I just pulled, your emotions are kind of like, oh, I don't know how this can all happen at once, or I'm not really sure emotionally how I can handle these things. And there just needs to be a little bit more gathering, a little bit more experimentation in order to move forward in this different way. Seven of Pentacles is what came up around like support. And so this is like where you and your partner, I think, are already thriving. Seven of Pentacles is all about, hey, like what have we already been growing that's working really well? Like how are we already working on projects together? How are we already like making great decisions for ourselves? And which seeds of those, are we going to propagate more? I also think that it would be really useful for you and your partner to start thinking about closing a chapter in terms of like, what are the boxes? What are the bucket lists? We all like love, hate that word, that you want to take care of individually and together so you can really feel complete in some way.
Okay.
Am I making sense?
Yeah.
And the reason why I
absolutely.
said I think this is going to be really great for you and probably them is this is also can be about finances. Seven of Pentacles. It's like coins. It's material. It's where our money is going. It's how our money is growing together. And sevens are this really interesting card where the sevens are about individuation and growth. And the shadow of the seven that I want you to be careful about, that we all need to be careful about, the shadow of the seven is making decisions more around what you don't want to happen, right? Like mitigating harm or like being like, oh, well, this could be the
Solving for
worst.
failure is what I do.
Solving for failure. And what would happen if you hung out in the Six of Wands and you like plan for victory?
Right.
What's the best case scenario and how do you move forward with that? First on your own, then with your partner, and then potentially with an expanded family. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that's great. That was beautiful. I feel good about that. I feel like I could have been close to panicking about time, but now I feel like I have a bit of permission to be gentle.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. I'm so glad that was useful. That's the episode. Hope you liked it. Please give Paco a follow. If you liked our conversation, you'll love Finances for the People. Makes a good buddy to my Money Alchemy workshop. But even if you don't subscribe or follow or buy anything, I want to say again, feeling weird about money, feeling uncomfortable about money is completely normal. And you can begin to feel more comfortable around your finances by taking small steps every day to learn a bit more, unpack some of your emotions, connect that to subconscious stuff, and take baby step actions around budgeting, handling money, and saving money. I swear, if you think you can't do it, you can do it. Because if I can do it, you can do it. Until soon, I'll be back next week with some really great questions around money from our patrons. Until soon. Moon Beaming is brought to you by the Moon Studio. It is created and hosted by me, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener. It is edited by Rose Blakelock with a lot of additional help from Hazel Frew. It is supported by our beautiful patrons, which you can join over at patreon.com, The Moon Studio. If you would like to further support the podcast, you can sign up for a sponsorship. You can rate and review it or share it with your friends or on your social media. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you so much.